Suntree. The past few weeks in worship, we have been singing on the gathering side a song called Graves into Gardens. I love this song. It's brand new to us, and the first time I heard it, I was emotional as I reflected on a God that does turn graves into gardens and mourning into dancing and shame into glory. And the song talks about the God of the mountain is also the God of the valley with us. And so in the midst of this crazy time, we thought, what an appropriate song to introduce for us to reflect and worship and hum or speak, I guess. If you want to, you can listen to it on your Spotify and scream sing it in the car, which is definitely what I've been doing this week. But as I heard this song for a second time last week in worship, I remembered Ezekiel 37, where God comes to Ezekiel in a dream, in a vision, and speaks to Ezekiel about the valley of dry bones. In the song, there's a line that says, "You turn bones into armies," and that comes directly from this passage in Ezekiel 37. And so I won't read all of it. I encourage you to go read it yourselves, but this passage has been one of the more profound passages in my own devotional life, as I imagine what God's able to do with the dead places and the valleys of death and the valleys of sadness and the valleys of dry bones in my own life. And so Ezekiel is brought into a valley of dry bones by the Lord's Spirit. And he knows he's in the midst of a vision of the Lord. And the surface of the valley is very dry and the bones are very dry. There is no sign of life. There is no sign of hope. It just seems to be completely dry, completely dead. And God speaks to Ezekiel and says, "Mortal, can these bones live?" And Ezekiel says, you know, God, I don't. And God instructs Ezekiel to prophesy to the bones that they might become and that they might live again. And so there's this beautiful imagery of the bones coming together and the sinews and the muscles and the skin coming back onto the bones, which I imagine is actually probably pretty gross to watch that process and the sounds that it would have made, but we won't go too much into that. I am obviously not a medical person. And Ezekiel sees this army now with flesh on these bones standing before him, but they are not yet alive. They are still waiting for the breath, the Spirit of God, to come upon them to make them live. And so Ezekiel is commanded by God to prophesy the breath of God over the bones and that they might live. Come prophesy the four winds on these bones. And they do. They become an army, and it becomes a sign for Ezekiel in the dead place in the desert that God's power is able to bring about more new life than Ezekiel could have ever imagined. And Ezekiel takes this as a sign of God's providence and God's presence with him. As I thought about this scripture and I thought about the song Graves into Gardens, I thought about the images from the fires out west. I thought about the places where life had been laid bare by hurricanes or different natural events. I thought about the way that right now, as we navigate this difficult coronavirus, often seems like we ourselves are walking in a valley of death, a valley of dry bones. And I remember, as I was praying about this scripture and this song, I sort of felt myself being asked, do you believe that these things can live again? Do I believe that we will one day crowd into a baseball stadium as a group of people again? Do I believe that we will have a regular Easter or Christmas season again? And I said, only you know, God. I don't know what is coming and what is ahead. But this scripture and that song, which again, I really do recommend to you, reminds us that God has the power to take the signs of death in our lives, both internally in our own spirits, in our own souls, and in the world, and make them living again. God raised Lazarus from the dead. God raised Jesus from the dead and continues to raise us into new life as Christians and as people who walk with Jesus. And so, as you know, here at Suntree, it's been kind of a weird month, couple of weeks, 6 months, but I'm holding on to this promise that the God who is with us in the mountain and in the valley of dry bones has the power to make our shame into glory, to make our mourning into dancing, and to make our graves into gardens. And so I hope that you feel that promise this week and that you get to scream sing your favorite worship song in the safety and in the alone time of your car too.